the inner atmosphere. State determines all translation. This is the 7-minute daily focus, day 31 of 365. The world mirrors the state you occupy. Today's focus, the inner atmosphere. State determines all translation. Reality is complete. Identity is complete. Presence is complete. But what determines how that completion becomes visible? Subjective state. Subjective state is the inner atmosphere you stand in. Subjective state is the climate of your metaphysical position. Subjective state is the tone of the self you acknowledge. Hill wrote, "You become what your mind dwells upon." I concur with the statement with refinement. You appear according to the state you dwell in. Pause for a moment. Close your physical eyes. Shift into the first sense. Observe inwardly. Subjective state is not emotion. Emotion reacts. Subjective state is not thought. Thought fluctuates. And subjective state is not behavior. Behavior expresses. Subjective state is your chosen inner position. It is the quality of awareness you hold, the internal atmosphere you choose, the metaphysical tone you stand in, and everything in the objective state. Everything you call your life arranges itself around the subjective state you occupy. Wattles wrote, "Hold yourself in the right place mentally." I concur with elevation. Hold yourself in the subjective state that matches actuality. Understand this principle with precision. Reality equals the subjective state, finished, actual, whole. Appearance equals the objective state, translated, reactive, expressive. Identity is who you are. Presence is how you stand. Subjective state is the atmosphere of your standing. Appearance is the physical world rearranging itself around that atmosphere. Thus, subjective state determines all translation. Your subjective state tells appearance what to become. Your subjective state instructs the five senses what to report. Your subjective state physically forms the lens that reveals the next step in the completed path. This is the metaphysical hierarchy: actuality, identity, presence, subjective state, appearance. Walk deeper into this reality literacy. You can hold a true identity but express a fractured state. You can acknowledge actuality but stand in a wavering state. And you can possess presence but allow the state to drift. Appearance does not respond to identity alone. It responds to the subjective state that holds identity. Hill declared, "Calmness of mind is one of the beautiful jewels of character." I concur with the statement with refinement. A steady, subjective state is the jewel that translates reality. When your state is fractured, translation becomes distorted. When your state is wavering, translation becomes inconsistent. When your state is reactive, translation becomes delayed. But when your subjective state is steady, presence becomes thick. When your subjective state is steady, identity becomes clear. When your subjective state is steady, appearance becomes obedient. Consider this. You are not trying to stabilize the physical world. You stabilize subjective state. You are not trying to control appearance. You anchor subjective state. You are not trying to fix conditions. You correct subjective state. Because subjective state determines how reality becomes physically visible. Subjective state determines what the five senses report. Subjective state determines how the path translates. So today, stand in the subjective state that matches your actuality. Hold the atmosphere that aligns with completion. Remain in the inner climate of certainty, for your subjective state determines everything that appears. Let me expand this reality literacy further, strengthening the metaphysical clarity of why subjective state is the determining force behind all translation. Subjective state is not merely an inner condition, it is the authorizing climate of your reality. It is the atmosphere through which actuality passes into appearance. When your subjective state is clear, reality translates clearly. when your subjective state is clouded, translation slows or distorts. Hill hinted at this truth when he wrote, "The dominating atmosphere of one's mind is the source of all results." I concur with accuracy. The subjective state is the source of all appearance. Wattle spoke similarly. You must think truth regardless of surroundings. I concur with elevation. You must hold the subjective state of truth regardless of surroundings. Sense this expansion inwardly. A steady subjective state does not bend to emotion. Emotion bends to it. A steady subjective state does not crumble under sensory contradiction. The senses eventually conform. A steady subjective state does not weaken in the presence of challenge. Challenge dissolves in the presence of actuality. This is why the self in actuality remains unmoved even when the objective state appears unstable. The subjective state is the bridge that holds translation steady, and when the bridge is firm, the translation is straight. Walk with this added clarity. Most people try to adjust their physical world, but the physical world is not the cause. Appearance reshapes itself only when the subjective state changes. This is the principle. Change subjective state. Appearance must change. Hold subjective state. Appearance must stabilize. Drift subjective state. Appearance becomes inconsistent. All power is seated in the subjective state because it is the place where identity meets actuality, and presence becomes translation. So today, return to the atmosphere that matches your reality. Hold the climate of certainty. Anchor the subjective state that reflects completion, for your subjective state is the architect of every appearance that forms. Affirmation for day 31. My subjective state is steady. My subjective state aligns with actuality, and my subjective state governs translation. And appearance follows the atmosphere I hold.